the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in beautiful downtown Raleigh. It's Science Tonight. Now here's your host, Chris Smith.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Science Tonight. I am your host, Chris Smith, and it's good to be with you this evening for another great episode of our show. Hey, thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in, whether you've found us and are watching us on YouTube right now or over at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences Facebook page. Glad that you're with us. Glad that you've joined us. Hey, drop a note over in the chat box or in the comments, like a waving emoji, or just say hello. Maybe, let me know where you're from, where you're watching, or even better, you could let me know how you found out about the program, because we want to get the word out about Science Tonight, because we talk every Thursday night with great people, amazing scientists, professionals, nature enthusiasts, and artists even, about how science applies to our lives every single day. We have a great time. We play a game, we do the interview, and one of the best parts really is that everybody watching gets the chance to participate too. So you can use the chat box and the comments thread to actually leave your thoughts and questions for our guest speakers as we go throughout the program. Later in the show, I'll actually be going over to the chat box, which I've got pulled up right here, and I'll be pulling cues for our guest to answer. So go ahead, and I see people saying, hi, the chat is lit up. I love to see it. Thanks for being here tonight. So glad that you're all here. It looks like we've got a great crowd. So tonight we're going to be talking about what might be one of the most thrilling, exciting topics. At some point in their life, any young science enthusiast seems to go through the dinosaur phase, right? Raise your hand wherever you are if you went through a dinosaur phase. I know that I did. I had the books. I got these cards and I'd collect them, and they had dinosaurs, like fact sheets. And every time I'd get the new dinosaur fact sheet in the mail, I was so excited to put it in my dinosaur book, right? Did anybody else have one of those? Maybe not. Anyway, dinosaurs are amazing. They're fantastic. But unless, of course, we're talking about modern day birds, we don't have dinosaurs around like we used to, for sure, right? So it's always exciting to meet paleontologists, people who are studying dinosaurs, who can give us a little bit of insight into what Earth was like more than 65 million years ago, and to talk to experts who can really give us some insight into what these creatures were really like, what their lives were like, how they came to be the way that they are. And tonight, we've got one of those experts. Evan Jevnikar is a paleontologist with us at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, so he didn't have to travel too far to be here, and which is funny because we're not traveling to be anywhere right now. We do the whole thing virtual. He's also a grad student at North Carolina State University. Let me welcome Evan to the show. Good to see you.
Glad to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So does all that sort of track? You're a paleontologist. Did you have a dinosaur phase as a young person? As a younger person?
I still have a dinosaur phase. Like, I'm still going through that phase.
Yeah, that was a silly question, wasn't it? Is a paleontologist over and done with the dinosaur phase? No, of course they're not.
Never.
Whoever really is, though. No one ever really is. Well, I'm glad you could be on the show tonight. How are things with you? How have you been? I don't see people in the museum anymore. So,
yeah, museums kind of just being really chill right now. We kind of have people coming in every once in a while for really important stuff. So I've been coming in every once in a while, just kind of lurking around, getting a few things done when I have the chance.
Yeah, that's sort of how we're all working it when we can. So, tell you what, I'm looking at the clock. Let's get into tonight's program, everybody. If you've watched Science Tonight before, you know that before we jump into the really hardcore science, we like to have a little bit of fun first. And we come up with some pretty good games for our paleontologists. So, Evan, I've got a game for you that I'm calling Name That Dinosaur. Sound exciting?
Ooh. It does sound exciting. I'm ready for it.
Think you could name any dinosaur that I would put in front of you?
I hope so. My advisor would be really mad if I couldn't.
You hope so. Well, here are the rules. I've actually prepared, I believe I got this, I hope I counted right. I prepared 8 different dinosaurs for you, but this is going to be a bit of a lightning round. I'm only going to give you about 10 seconds to look at the dinosaur, and then you have to tell me that dinosaur's name. The trick is, these are not scientific names or common names. These are all dinosaurs that have human or human-like names because they're dinosaurs from films and TV.
Oh, I see. There's a twist.
There's the twist. I'm so excited for this. So you've got to name the TV or movie dinosaur, and you can't say T-Rex. Duh, we would know that one. I want to know what that T-Rex's name was in the movie or film. But I'm only going to give you 10 seconds on the clock. After 10 seconds, if you haven't guessed it, we go right on to the next one. And I am going to keep track of how many you get right.
All right. This is either going to go really well or really bad. So either way, it's going to be fun.
I think it's going to go great for you. I think you're going to be amazing. You're a dinosaur expert. I think this is going to be great. Let's get started. 3, 2, 1. Here's your first one.
Oh,
all right. 10 seconds.
Dino from Flintstones.
Dino, ding, 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 from the Flintstones. Nice job. Okay.
Now,
Now, of course, we
the
want
raptor.
the lizard. Yes. Nice job. Let's get the next one. Tougher.
Oh, Littlefoot. That's what it is. From Land Before Time.
Littlefoot. Okay. We're 3 for 3. This one is tough, I think.
Does that even have a name? Rexy, maybe?
Rexy is correct.
Oh, wow.
Nice one. Okay. How about this one? We've got Whoopi Goldberg on the right, but who's on the left?
Oh my gosh. It looks like Sinclair from Dinosaurs, but I don't know if that's right. I have no idea.
That was time, not Sinclair. Okay, how about this one?
Oh my gosh. This is like the one Disney movie I've never seen. Shame on me.
Oh, time's almost gone. Ooh, didn't get that one.
Ooh, this one, it's like
Come on, Evan.
Gertie or Dorothy. It's like a really old name.
Gertie is correct.
Oh, nice.
You got Gertie. All right, last
Rex.
one.
Of course.
Couldn't leave out Rex in the pantheon
okay.
of TV and movie dinosaurs. Excellent job. Here's the list of all the correct answers. Well, so let's see. You missed Theodore.
Okay.
It was Theodore Rex in the movie Theodore Rex with Whoopi Goldberg. And then in the Disney movie Meet the Robinsons, the giant Tyrannosaur is named Tiny.
Of course.
But hey, look, six out of 8 is not bad. Not bad. That definitely earns you a spot in the Science Tonight Hall of Fame. Excellent job. Everybody, let's give a big round of applause to Evan Jevnikar, paleontologist.
I'm honored.
Excellent work. You know, it was actually really tricky to find dinosaurs that had that were given names in TV and in movies. Most of the time, they just have like a species designation because they're just a big, scary creature running around.
Yeah. Interesting.
Which is unfortunate, right? I mean, there's only a handful of dinosaurs that have been given the benefit of being a little bit more than great, big, and scary, right? Oh, well.
I know, right? They're cute. They're fun. They're good people. Good dinosaurs.
Although, let's see. So I've learned a little bit about what you study. And so I'm guessing maybe they're cute when they're little, but they're not so cute when they're giant. That's when they get a little bit scary.
Yeah,
But
tyrannosaurs are.
Tyrannosaurs are scary. But for the folks at home, well, and for me, tell us a little bit about who you are and what exactly it is you study when it comes to dinosaurs.
All right. So my name is Evan Jevnikar. I'm a master's student at North Carolina State University, and I'm also a paleontologist at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. And so I study paleontology. I study the one focus that I have. Let me see if I can pull up my screen. So what I study is dinosaurs, really. I love to dig up dinosaurs. Can everybody see that? Are we good?
Looks good.
Awesome. So yes, I study dinosaurs. I love all the big scary stuff, really giant birds, reptiles. So these are a couple pictures of me out in the field digging up some dinosaurs. And more specifically, what I love to study is ontogeny, which is really just a fancy way of saying how dinosaurs grow and how they change as they grow. And the one dinosaurs that I love to look at are tyrannosaurs, which, as you can tell by the graphic, it's the family that T-Rex belongs to. And the way that I study ontogeny is by cutting up their bones. So we take a lot of their bones, we cut them up, grind them down, look at them underneath a microscope, and we can kind of see their growth record. And we call this method paleohistology. So this is a really awesome way that we can see the growth record of a dinosaur, because I mean, you're only left with what it looks like when it dies. And there's so much more information stuck inside the bone cortex of these dinosaurs. And so what I usually do is when you look at dinosaurs, there's so much you can learn from the inside of their bone cortex. You can kind of tell if they're really fast growers or if they're slow growers. As you can tell on the left, if they have really organized bone tissue, that means that they grow really slow. They have enough time to like put down these layers of bone. Whereas on the right, it's kind of crazy all over the place. That means they're growing really fast. And if they also have a lot of space for veins, that means they have a lot of space to like take in nutrients and they're growing really fast. Whereas if they don't have a lot of space for veins, then they aren't growing as fast. They're a lot slower in growth.
Okay, so Evan, talk me through the photos that I'm seeing right here. So the one on the left, the one that's more like brown and gray, that was a photo of the sort of organized bone growth that tells us what?
Yes, so this bone over on the left, we call this lamellar bone, which is kind of just signifying that this bone is growing really slowly. It has a lot of time to organize itself and lay down really smoothly. So you get these really nice layers of bone cortex that are being deposited. And all these little holes are where veins would pop in, so little vascular holes. And so this is, I can't remember exactly what animal this was, but it's a reptile of some sort. And so it's kind of signifying slow growth. Whereas the picture on the right.
The image on the right.
Yes. So this is, I'm pretty sure this is an elk. So this animal, so as you can tell, it's warm-blooded. It's growing really quickly. It's not as organized. You can't see this really nice layering of bone tissue. And so it's kind of scattered all over the place because it's just trying to grow really quickly. And it's got all these pores and a lot of these spaces for veins. So it needs nutrients and blood to help grow it so quickly. So that's kind of how we can tell whether something grows really quickly or slowly. And this is all very simplified. This all kind of exists on a spectrum. So we might see something kind of in between or something more like the picture on the right or more like the picture on the left. But it's all kind of, every bone is unique, I like to say. Every dinosaur or every slide I look at tells a really unique tale.
Very interesting. Thanks for bringing the pictures to show, because that sort of lays out a little more clearly what I think you sort of are studying and what you get at.
Mhm.
And are you still there? You can jump back on camera
Oh,
too.
yeah,
So
of course.
tell me,
Let
you
see.
mentioned studying T-Rex and Tyrannosaur relatives. How does your work connect to T-Rex? Like, are you looking at T-Rex fossils and looking for these growth rings? Is that your job?
Oh, so no. So what I usually do is, you brought up a really good point, is wondering how we kind of age these dinosaurs. And so these tissue is one way that we do it, but another way is that this bone, they lay down in these layers, and it makes it really easy to count like growth rings. So they kind of appear a lot like a tree. And so the same logic applies. You can count from the inside down, and you can find the age of this dinosaur. And so I'm using that technique and looking at these different bone tissues, and I'm looking at tyrannosaurs, the family of tyrannosaurs, and T-Rex, because T-Rex is kind of an anomaly in its family, because not a lot of tyrannosaurs actually were really big. A lot of them were mostly, sorry, let me skip ahead to some of the slides I got. A lot of them were really small. So these guys were
Okay, I
super
see.
small. They were only about like 80 pounds, about like 2 or 3 feet long. And this was a majority of what tyrannosaurs looked like throughout geologic history. But then later on, about 17 million years before all dinosaurs went extinct, so pretty late in the game, these guys started getting bigger. They kind of got bigger heads and really stronger. And they would, in the same amount of time that these younger ones would live, about 10 years, these guys would be twice that size. So they started growing really quickly. And so these guys, a little later, about 70 million years, considering that dinosaurs went extinct 66, so really late, they move over to Asia, stay over there for a couple million years, and migrate back. And once they migrate back, we get T-Rex, which is huge. It's massive. It's one of the biggest dinosaurs that we've ever found, or one of the biggest land predators, and it's grows insanely quickly. There have been histological studies on Tyrannosaurus where they look at its growth, and the growth rings are really spaced out far, so it had really accelerated growth. So it grew really quickly in the same amount of time that these other tyrannosaurs were living. And so what I'm looking at is I'm trying to see, well, when did this happen? Why did tyrannosaurs get such really accelerated growth? Or why did they grow so quickly? When and where did that happen? And so to do that, I'm looking at this dinosaur called Tarbosaurus. So Tarbosaurus is this brown fossil right in between the human skeleton and the T-Rex. So Tarbosaurus is a lot like T-Rex. It's pretty similar except for the size. So it's about half the size of T-Rex, but it's also twice the size of all these other, I'd say, intermediate tyrannosaurs. So it's like the perfect Goldilocks case for us to study how growth is changing in the evolution of these dinosaurs.
So give me a little bit of background here. Just exactly how big would T-Rex get to be? And then how fast would it grow to be that big?
Ooh. So T-Rex would get up to about 9,000 kilograms. That's probably the biggest specimen that we have. And it would do that in about 22 years. So, I mean, I'm 23 right now. I'm not that big. So these guys would grow insanely fast. They'd be putting on pounds and pounds every single year. So they were really fast growers.
Okay, so like a 1-year-old T-Rex would be just like chicken sized, and then within 20 some odd years, it would be 9,000 kilograms.
Yeah, we haven't found any juvenile, or I guess we found juveniles, but we haven't found any hatchling T-Rex fossils. So we don't know what they look like when they just got out of the eggs and how big they would be, but they would have to grow insanely big. It would have to be probably around maybe 15 kilograms. So that would be maybe roughly 10, 20 pounds. So they're pretty decent size once they get out of the egg, and then they would have to grow even bigger.
Okay, so that's impressive. I mean, what's the benefit of being a dinosaur that grows that fast so quickly?
That's a really good question. People are really trying to answer that question a lot these days. People are looking at Tyrannosaur growth because it's so wild. One theory that I really like, or one hypothesis, it was put forth by this girl named Lisa Cooper. She put out this paper in 2008 that studied why things might be getting so big, why tyrannosaurs grow so fast. And it looked at this dinosaur called Hypacrosaurus, which is a duck-billed dinosaur. It's a herbivore. And they found that this one grew really fast as well. And so in the paper, they tested Hypacrosaurus growth, T-Rex growth, and Albertosaurus, which is one of these intermediate dinosaurs, or intermediate tyrannosaurs. And they found that it seemed to be this race of who could grow the fastest. Because herbivores didn't want to stay small because it would be easier to snack on them. And then tyrannosaurs didn't want to stay small because then their prey would overshadow them and it'd be harder to hunt them. So it kind of became this race to see who could grow the fastest and who could maybe have the advantage of the other. So that's one hypothesis. But there's probably much more out there.
Okay, lots of hypotheses. That one, I guess that's your favorite hypothesis so far then?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the most sound hypotheses so far.
And so then you mentioned studying Tarbosaurus. So connect the biggest baddie T-Rex to Tarbosaurus for me. They're both carnivores. They're both in the Tyrannosaur lineage. But how do you learn about T-Rex by studying this other relative somewhere else on the planet?
So the reason why Tarbosaurus is so important is because it's the sister taxon to T-Rex, which is the closest relative that we know in the fossil record to T-Rex. So once we study Tarbosaurus, we can get a really good idea of how T-Rex would have grown, because in a short amount of time, if we see how Tarbosaurus grew, if we know that it had really accelerated growth, then we could kind of see that it was the precursor to how T-Rex would grow. And then that eventually led to them migrating out, coming back to North America, and having those same growth patterns.
So you said sister taxa. So does that mean that T-Rex and Tarbosaurus were living alongside each other at the same time? Was it that they were at two different parts of the planet at the same time, or did they not exist in the same time periods? Like Tarbosaurus is an earlier relative.
So Tarbosaurus is an earlier relative. So T-Rex lived at 66 million years ago, which is when all of them went extinct. And then Tarbosaurus lived at about 70 million years. So it's a little earlier in time, and it's on the other side of the planet. So this is before they all migrated back to North America. So it's a little earlier in time. So if we find that Tarbosaurus also had this accelerated growth, then we can know that this is kind of a more earlier evolved feature. So a lot earlier tyrannosaurs had this feature. And then we can start working back. Well, if T-Rex had this and Tarbosaurus had this, well, what's the next in line that had this? And then keep moving it back until we see when this started to originate, or when it started to increase or change or transition.
So how good is the fossil record then?
The fossil record, at least for Tarbosaurus, is really good. There are tons of specimens on this guy. I mean, for our study, we're going to be looking at 12 different specimens, one of which, they're all from Mongolia. They're all from the Institute of Paleontology in Mongolia. And we are looking at the smallest specimen ever found of Tarbosaurus, and also conveniently one of the biggest. So we got a big range of sizes for these guys. And so we'll be able to look at how this all changes throughout their growth. We'll be able to see the entire spectrum of their ontogeny in this study.
So you'll be taking fossils of Tarbosaurus and slicing them up and looking for growth rings under the microscope? Is that the methodology for
Yes.
this particular specimen too?
Yes, so that's the methodology that we have right now. And so we've already done a little bit of this on one of the youngest, this really small Tarbosaurus that we have. I can kind of show some of the things that we found with this guy. So this is a specimen that we've looked at so far. This is the really small guy. We looked at the histology and we found that it's 3 years old. So still pretty small. This is what it would look like when it was alive. Nice little cute little guy. And so at 3 years old, I've been able to look at some retro calculations, kind of run some math and back calculate to see what it looked like as a hatchling. And so that on the bottom is what it would look like as a juvenile, like coming probably at 0 years old, maybe a little earlier, 1 year old. So it would have gained about 70 pounds from just 3 years of growth. So I guess to put that into perspective, us in our first years of life, we only gain about 7 pounds. So these guys were really quick growers. They grew really, really fast. And so if we kind of kept that math going, kept those calculations, try to see where that trajectory went, these guys would be about 2,000 pounds in about 10 years, which is already pretty crazy. And then to get to the biggest specimen that we know, it would have been about 20, 22 years. So humongous, and they were really fast.
That's very impressive. Oh my gosh. So how long then would a Tarbosaurus or a T-Rex even live? Do we have an idea of like what the upper limit is for one of these? Because I'm thinking, okay, if they're fully grown within 20 or so years, and at that point, like they grow really quick, but then they're big. But if they're gone at like age 30, is that actually growing so super duper fast, or is it sort of proportional to their lifespan?
Yeah, so we don't really know how long Tarbosaurs lived. We don't know. No one's ever done this kind of study, which is what I'll be doing. But they've done this on T-Rex, and we've found one of the oldest specimens that we know is Sue, which is from the Field Museum. It's one of the biggest T-Rexes that we found. And that specimen lived up to 28 years old. So it stopped growing effectively at 22 years old and then lived for an extra 6 years, which is pretty rare. We don't find a lot of Tyrannosaurus rex fossils that big or old. So I guess considering if that math holds, probably Tarbosaurs could live to about 25, 28 years old as well, maybe even 30s, who knows?
Okay, so they really are growing fast, but they're also continuing to grow into like the latter third of their life expectancy. That seems pretty impressive.
So they don't grow as much in their latter years. And so the way that we can tell if they're not growing is by looking at certain features in their histology. We can find two features. I wonder if I could share my screen really quickly. But there's two features that we can find in the bone cortex that shows that they've effectively stopped growing. And one of these features is over on the left. This thing is called an external fundamental system. And so, as you know, you can count the growth rings to see how big they're growing. And this little area over on the top left, it's really dark. These growth lines are super thin. They're just barely stacking on top of each other. So it's technically growing, but at such a small rate that we wouldn't be able to notice it with our eyes. They're just barely growing. So that's when they would have become skeletally mature. And then the picture on the left, these things are called secondary osteons. And so what these are, these really kind of callousy looking knobs in the bone, they resorb some of the inner bone and they take that material and help grow newer bone on the outside. And so You kind of find these throughout a lot of bones. Some of the really juvenile specimens kind of have one or two scattered out throughout the cortex. As you get older, you get more and more. And then some of the oldest specimens, like Sue, has a lot of this inside of its bones. And then some of the oldest specimens are covered nearly entirely of this secondary osteons. It's just completely covered the bones, completely changed it. And that's how we know they're like extremely large.
I'm just fascinated that when these bones fossilize, that all of this information is preserved, that you can deduce the age of a tyrannosaur because the fossilization allows you to still see the layers of growth that happen, even at that like microscopic layer level, right at closer to the end of their life. That's just fascinating.
It is crazy. It's so fascinating. And it's even more fascinating to think about that this kind of method, this histology, has only been around for the better half of this century. I mean, most histology has only been in like 2000s, 2000 teens. The first couple histology studies happened in the 90s. So it's a new field of paleontology opening up, and it's just growing more and more every single year. And I'm just ecstatic to see what other kind of things we can learn about dinosaur growth.
Well, actually, that was my next question. What are some of the other things that you learn about, say, a Tarbosaurus from looking at these growth rings or the growth pattern overall? Are there other life history traits that you can investigate?
Yes. I mean, from this record, this is going to be a really good foundational study in showing what the timeline of Tarbosaurus growth is going to be. So we'll get to know how long they live, at what pace they grow to the size that they do. And then from this, we can start testing other hypotheses, like how do their bones change, which is the study of velometry. How does that grow? How do those change? We can analyze maybe some aspects of their ecology, trace that to different parts of their lifespan, kind of learn maybe they're changing their niche as they grow, changing their diet. So there's a lot of things that we can know from just knowing how they age. There's so much more. It opens up a whole new door into study of this dinosaur.
Do you have an idea of what happened between the turkey-sized tyrannosaurs or deer-sized tyrannosaurs and the really big ones like Tarbosaurus and T-Rex?
I don't know. At that time when Tyrannosaurs started to get big is when a lot of other really big predators started to go extinct. It was what we call like an extirpation event. So really localized extinctions. And so in North America, you get these really small tyrannosaurs. And at that time, there were really big allosaurs. And like Ceops micorum, that's one of the dinosaurs that we found from the North Carolina Museum. That goes extinct. That kind of opens the door for all these other dinosaurs to fill that niche. So tyrannosaurs end up having to fill this apex predator role. And slowly over time, they get there. And then it just snowballs until they're just these massive, scary, big teeth predators.
Okay, interesting. How complete then is the record for tyrannosaurs to let you trace the evolutionary changes from one to the other?
So it's really good from T-Rex down to these intermediate dinosaurs. So there's when all these dinosaurs started to originate, what's called the Campanian, which is right before dinosaurs went extinct. There was a Campanian period, and then the Maastrichtian, which is when they all went extinct. So in the Campanian, there's this huge explosion in tyrannosaur diversity. So we have been finding tons of them all over North America and Asia. So that record is really good. Before the Campanian, it gets a little spotty. We don't know as many tyrannosaurs in there, so it's kind of hard. And then once we get to like those really small size ones, there's only a couple that we can look at. Those three that I showed we're really the only three that we've been able to section in histology. We've been able to cut up those three and look at how they grow. So it's a little spotty near the beginning.
Okay. Interesting stuff. So I'm going to remind everybody who's tuned in watching, again, I'm glad you're all here tuned in. A lot of questions and conversation happening over in the chat and the comments. That's great. I love to see it. I'll remind you, everybody, in just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to all of you. And maybe we'll actually get the recipe on how to grow a T-Rex from Evan. I don't know if he's at liberty to share the official recipe or not, but we'll try.
That's confident.
And I'll start asking Evan all of your questions, everybody. So stay put. But Evan, before I get to that point, how did you actually? We talked about dinosaur phases earlier, but how did you actually get into paleontology and actually begin studying and become a paleontologist?
Yeah, so I took a more traditional route, I guess. I just kind of studied hard and tried to get as good of grades as I possibly could in high school. And then when I was able to go to the University of Kansas to study geology and paleontology, and I remember distinctly going in to become a volunteer for the KU Natural History Museum. I was so nervous. I went in there, I wore something like this, and I was like sweating bullets. I'm like, hey, I'm ready to like apply to be the volunteer for KU. And the person at the front desk was like, oh, that's okay, just go down there. And I went down, I talked to my advisor at the time. His name was David Burnham, and he was such a cool guy. I was like, hey, I'd love to be a volunteer here. And he's like, cool, yeah. He pulled out a sheet and set it down. He's like, this is the volunteer form, fill that out. And I'm filling it out. And he's like, so when do you want to start? Can you start today? I'm like, every child's dream. I'm like, yes, I would love to start today. I would love to start looking at dinosaurs. He's like, cool, all right, let's go down. And the rest was history from there. I got to go to a couple conferences, talk about some of the stuff we were finding, because we found a juvenile Tyrannosaur, and me and Dr. Burnham are working on a paper for that. I'll be coming out eventually. And I got to meet Lindsay Zano, Dr. Zano, who is super awesome at a conference for paleontology. Met her, we talked about grad school, and was able to come out, have the interview, and I love the team. I met them. I was like, this is an amazing team. Everybody at the North Carolina Museum is awesome. And the rest is history. Got on the team, started digging up dinosaurs and doing research. So just happy to be here.
I'll absolutely second that. Dr. Zano and the paleo team at the museum are top notch, best in the business. They do pay me to say that, but I would say it anyway.
They don't pay me to say that, but they're awesome regardless. They're so cool.
Yeah. That's awesome. And let's see. I'm looking over here at the chats now to see what the questions are that are coming in. And maybe I should start with a question from David Burnham.
Oh, look at that.
Would that be okay
That's
with
so
you?
cool. They showed up.
David wants to know, Evan, why didn't T-Rex make it to Eastern North America? Why are there not T-Rex in North Carolina? I want one here.
Great question. So right now there's not as many. So we have some beds over in North Carolina that preserve a couple tyrannosaurs. They're distant cousins of T-Rex. And they're much smaller, actually. They're in this intermediate zone. So they were able to make it over, but T-Rex wasn't. And that's a wonderful question. I don't know why. But we see a lot of T-Rex over on the western side of North America. But, I guess at around that time, there were a lot of mountain building events. So it kind of cut off T-Rex from going over to the eastern side of North America. So once those mountains started to come down, we were able to see kind of this intermixing of taxa. So we get these old tyrannosaurs on the eastern side that are now starting to intermingle and kind of be with some of these over on the western side. But we don't ever get to see T-Rex on the eastern side.
were there any tyrannosaurs on the, I guess what I think of today, maybe as the east coast of the U.S., North America?
So there's two. The first one is Appalachiosaurus. I think we actually found that. Was that in North Carolina? I can't quite remember. But Appalachiosaurus, that is one of the closer relatives to T-Rex, relatively, still a little distant. And then there's another one called Dryptosaurus. So that's a little older one, but they're still kind of these intermediate-sized tyrannosaurs.
Okay, cool. I'm glad we at least got something over here.
Yeah, we got to rep some tyrannosaurs.
All right. Lots of great questions coming in. Jack is asking, have you ever found any proteins?
Any proteins in tyrannosaurs? Me personally, no, I have not. But I know there is some research going into that, trying to find proteins in dinosaur bones. I remember actually very distinctly meeting somebody on my grad school interview who was going into a similar lab with Dr. Schweitzer, who also studies dinosaur, like the histology and the growth of dinosaurs. And he was studying proteins and fossils, which I didn't know if you could find those. So it might be possible. It's really hard to find. It's they're really easy to break down, but it might be possible. We'll see what the future holds.
I think if folks are interested in stuff like that and soft tissues preserved in bone, in fossil, they can go, if they go back into the Science Cafe playlist here on the museum's YouTube channel, I think there's a presentation from Dr. Mary Schweitzer in there and her talking about her work at NC State on just that. So take a look back in the archive for that one. All right, next question here. Penelope asks, what rate of growth would be defined as fast? That's a great question.
That is a great question. So we know that tyrannosaurs, the way that the number works is it's kind of a weird number. It's 1 over a year. That's the unit of growth. So tyrannosaurs had a 0.4 per year growth. I know that doesn't really make much sense when you say it aloud, but it's really fast. I would have to kind of divide that by how much mass they grow, but it's a good number. We're going to look into that. Once we start cutting up some tyrannosaurs and some tarbosaurs, we'll actually get to that number. So stay tuned for when that paper comes out.
So is that like so that's like an index for growth. And,
yes.
And a 0.4 is way up there. What would be a low number?
A low number would be something closer to 1. I know some of the smaller intermediate tyrannosaurs have closer to 1, maybe at 1 per year. I guess that would be the correct way of defining it.
Okay. So just, I was looking for like some context of like, okay, if it's a 0.4, is that fast? He's saying that's fast compared to others.
It's
like,
fast.
okay,
I know it's small. It's fast.
That's rockets compared to everything else.
Very backwards.
Okay. It's okay. Let's see. Earl has got a question here. Can you give us some examples about 2 or more dinosaur species that turned out to be the same, but some specimens we found were young and others were old?
So I guess if I'm understanding the question right, we found 2 sets of bones, and then we realized that these 2 species were actually the same species?
Yes.
Yes. So that happens a couple times in paleontology. Actually, that's what the current hypothesis of T-Rex growth was. There used to be this dinosaur called Nanotyrannus, and it was much smaller than T-Rex. It would have been considered a dwarf species. And so they thought that this Tyrannosaur was around, living next to T-Rex. And after a couple studies that came out, there's this one person named Holly Woodward. She's actually on my committee for my thesis. She went and cut open the bones, did the exact same kind of paleohistology that I'm doing, and she found that these pygmy dinosaurs were actually juveniles. So they were really quick-growing dinosaurs, and so it kind of, our current hypothesis is that these are really just juvenile T-Rexes. So it happens a lot in paleontology. You find out new things all the time.
There you go. There you go. Okay, Aubrey's got a good question too. Are we sure that our largest Tarbosaurus is skeletally mature? And I guess you've got the little now I've forgotten what you called it, but all the growth layers are smushed together.
System, or an EFS for short. External fundamental system, or EFS.
Everybody remember that, the EFS.
Write it down.
Equals old dinosaurs.
So yes, to answer
you're going to need that
question,
one in trivia.
So to answer her question, we don't know because nobody's ever really done this study before. Nobody's ever done histology on Tarbosaurus. So I guess I'll be the first person to find out if our largest specimen is skeletally mature. But the one we're looking at, the one that's going to be coming into my study, is much bigger than the vast majority of Tarbosaurs that have been found. A lot of them are, some of the next biggest specimens are about 2/3 the size of what this specimen is. So I got a hunch that this guy is skeletally mature. Just a hunch, but we'll have to cut it open to see.
Nice, nice. All right, lots of questions coming in here. I hope I'm not missing any. I think we're doing a good job here. Okay, was there more oxygen in the atmosphere to enable larger growth?
So
I've heard of this in relation to invertebrates.
Yes, and that is the
but
case
not
with invertebrates. A lot of big bugs back in the Carboniferous, but with dinosaurs, we have actually a lot of carbon in the air at around the time the T-Rex was around. So we kind of had greenhouse warming in the late Cretaceous. So I don't know if oxygen was the case. Maybe it was. I know it might have been the case in the late Jurassic when we have all those really big sauropods and long necks, allosaurs. That might have contributed to it, but might be something different in the late Cretaceous.
All right, here's another one from Erla. Hi, Erla. Let's see. Could gigantism, well, let me just read what Erla wrote here. Gigantism of predators, rapid development of huge species is often associated with island geobiology, such as monitor lizards being huge. Could this be affected by environmental conditions?
This very well might be. And I think this is what could, what the study might lay the foundation for. This is something that I've kind of toyed with the idea of, is seeing if maybe these environments are causing tyrannosaurs to grow quickly. We know that T-Rex, Dr. Woodward, in her study, she found that the growth rates were kind of modular. These growth lines were kind of weird and they kind of space in and out. So there might be some growth variability associated with T-Rex growth. So it might be able to modulate its growth based on resources that are around, which is something that modern animals do occasionally in times of really hard stress. So maybe the environments are a cause. I think that's a really awesome question to test, and I would love to find out the answer to that.
All right, the next one here goes back to when we were talking about, I guess when I mentioned T-Rex babies, T-Rex hatchlings. The question is, are all hatchlings rare? Is it rare to find baby dinosaurs?
Yes. We've never found a hatchling. Actually, I take that back. We have found one. It's taken just until this past year that we found a hatchling tyrannosaur. But all that was found was part of the jaw and then a toe. So not much is found. It's exceedingly hard to find. I think you could probably count on one hand how many, or maybe two hands, how many embryonic dinosaurs have been found. It's exceedingly rare because to find a fossil is really rare. You have to be able to bury that fossil and make sure it doesn't get disturbed. So then to make sure that a baby can get buried and undisturbed is extra, extra hard if the mama's looking out for it. So they're very hard to find.
All right. Katie is asking, why study the Tarbosaurus? Is it more accessible to learn about than T-Rex?
So I
you
guess
explained that at the lineages.
Mm-hmm.
So but is it easier to study a Tarbosaurus than a T-Rex? Yeah.
I guess I think that it's much more knowledgeable to find out about Tarbosaurus. Nobody's looked at it. So I'd really like to find out the origins of this. We kind of know the endpoint, which is T-Rex. We know it grew really fast. It was an anomaly as far as dinosaur growth was, but we don't really know when that happened or why it happened. So I guess the reason why I'm doing this research is to find out why and when, and find out all of these premises that are based around T-Rex. So it is a little more accessible to study T-Rex since it's in North America, but I live in North America, so I guess it's a little easier.
All right. I'm looking at the clock. I hope we get to all these questions. We might have the last few might have to be a lightning round, Evan.
Lightning round. Let's
just
do it.
Just try to get to them. Okay. Yeah. Jack is asking, how dense were Tyrannosaur blood vessels?
They were pretty dense. There's a lot of blood vessels because they grew really fast. There's a lot of them in there. Very dense.
Got to have a lot of blood vessels to grow fast.
Right.
Got to move those nutrients around.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see. Victoria is curious. Didn't Tyrannosaurus eat their babies?
I haven't seen any evidence of them eating their babies. There is evidence that tyrannosaurs were cannibals, but that's much later in life, and that might have been just to scavenge. There's been no evidence that we've seen of eating their young. It'd be pretty hard to find because their bones are so small, it might digest really easily. But we do know that older T-Rex might have eaten older T-Rex as well, if they were already dead. So very rare occurrence.
Okay. I'm going to have to look into that one too. I saw somebody tweeting about that one today. I'm curious about that one too. That was going to get a Google later. Okay. How did they sustain growing that fast with what may have been limited food?
I guess they would have to eat a lot. I know that's really weird if they had limited food, but a lot of the prey items in the environment that T-Rex lived in the Hell Creek, we have Triceratops, which is one of the biggest ceratopsians or horned dinosaurs. And then there's also Edmontosaurus, which is one of the biggest hadrosaurs or duck-billed dinosaurs. So there's a lot of big prey items for them to eat. So they could just scavenge off of what's there or take down juveniles of those really big species, or once they're big enough, they can just start taking down whole dinosaurs. So there's a lot of food volume per each dinosaur that they could eat.
All right. Let's see here. I'm being selective on the questions now. I have to be because I've got 3 minutes left in our show. I try to be respectful of everybody's time. So I've got a question from a 5th grader. What was the asteroid impact on Earth called? I assume the one that killed the dinosaurs is the one we're talking about.
Good question. Yeah. So the asteroid that impacted and killed the dinosaurs was called the Chicxulub impact, and that is in Yucatan Peninsula. So that was the one that killed all the dinosaurs.
Including T-Rex, right?
Killed T-Rex, killed Triceratops. It just kind of vaporized all those really giant dinosaurs around. All gone.
Do you think that that is what took out the dueling dinosaurs?
Oh, nice segue. Yes, I think it might have. Who knows? It was conveniently in the Hell Creek Formation 66 million years ago when it was all destroyed. But I don't think I wasn't there at the site, but I don't think that we would have found probably asteroid impact in the fossils. I haven't heard that on the scuttlebutt. I haven't found any asteroid fragments in these bones, but maybe. One can always hope. That'd be really cool, wouldn't it? That'd be so neat.
That's what the science is for. The science is meant to find out. Since I did bring up the dueling dinosaurs in what I don't think was that clean of a segue, can you tell folks a little bit about it, and if you actually will be a part of the dueling dinosaurs project at the museum?
So the dueling dinosaurs is this really awesome fossils that we found. If you don't know, we were able to procure some fossils of a subadult or adult Triceratops that's fairly complete. It's about maybe 50 or above % complete, which is really good. And then we were also able to get a 100% complete juvenile T-Rex. That's right, 100%. That's the only time we've ever found a 100% complete T-Rex. So it's got literally from the snout to the end of the tail. It's got skin impressions from what I heard. Maybe it's even got gut contents, but we haven't probed that far. So it's got the whole shebang. It's a really cool fossil. I don't know if we're going to be working, if I'm going to be a part of the team to research it. I would love to. But that's so far off. We still got to get it out of the block. There's so much that we got to prep out. So fingers crossed.
Sounds good. And folks, of course, if you're interested in dinosaurs of all kinds, you can hit up naturalsciences.org, take a spin around the museum's website, particularly the paleontology research pages. You can get more information about the work going on inside our paleontology labs. And you can go to, I think it's duelingdinosaurs.org or .com. I'm not 100% sure right now. Evan, if you know, correct me.
That is correct.
It's one of those two. But you can hit up the microsite from the museum and get more information about the Dueling Dinosaurs project that we just announced a few months ago. Really exciting stuff coming out of the museum. And it's awesome that we have such a great paleo team at our museum who are investigating the mysteries of dinosaurs.
That's right.
So, yeah, he's just like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
it's super duper cool. Evan, if people wanted to keep track of you and your research, are there places they should go to keep a lookout?
So I guess you could always follow me on Twitter. I'm at Evan Jevnikar on Twitter. That's pretty much me. You could always follow people in our lab. Dr. Lindsay Zano is going to be Expedition Live on Twitter. You can follow the museum on Twitter. You could check us out on all that stuff. Yeah, social media, Instagram. I'm pretty sure the Natural Science Museum has an Instagram page. It does. Check it out. It's cool. You'll learn some stuff.
Thanks very much. And there it is, everybody, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can follow the Museum of Natural Sciences. We are at Natural Sciences on all the socials. You can also, again, hit up naturalsciences.org to see more, learn more, do more. Come and visit the museum. We're open right now with lots of safety protocols in place, so you can actually come and see some dinosaur fossils up close. That's at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in downtown Raleigh. Evan, thanks so much for being on the program tonight and sharing your research with us.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I loved it. It was awesome.
Yeah, this was great. I can't wait to actually meet you, see you around the museum, since that hasn't happened yet.
It'll be good to see you walk around
One of these days. There we go. I'm looking forward to it. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to this edition of Science Tonight. Thanks for dropping your questions in the chat. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. There was so much great conversation happening over there in the chat. I'll remember next time we do dinosaurs to get to the Q&A a little bit earlier in the program. But until next time, everybody, take care, stay safe. We'll be back here next Thursday night at 7 o'clock for the next edition of Science Tonight. Of course, next week, all week long, the museum is celebrating reptile and amphibian days. Starting Monday through Saturday, we'll be bringing you live presentations, several each day throughout the day. So hit up the museum's website to get more details. Sign up to get the links and information. Or you can also just subscribe to the museum's YouTube channel right here. Right here on our YouTube channel is where we'll be bringing almost all of our reptile and amphibian days content live. So subscribe to our channel, click the bell to get notified when we go live here on YouTube, and you can take in all of the great programs that we have set up for you next week. Next Thursday night here on Science Tonight, I'll be talking to a gopher tortoise expert and a wildlife biologist who's doing conservation around the world on all kinds of wild places and wild animals, Amanda Hips. It's going to be a great conversation, so I hope that you'll join me next week as well. Until then, everybody, like I said, take care, stay safe, keep your community safe, and I'll see you again soon. Good night, everybody.